Right now, a 6'2" convicted murderer is curled into a fetal ball inside a plastic dog crate. He's not breathing. He's starved himself for weeks, losing 25 pounds of muscle just to fit inside a space the size of a microwave. He is defying the laws of human anatomy, praying that his bones don't crack. He's hiding exactly 3 feet away from a prison guard who has a loaded gun and a radio. The man inside the box is John Manard. He is violent, he is dangerous, and he is serving a life sentence. He is never supposed to see the sky again. Driving the van is not a criminal mastermind, it is a 50-year-old grandmother named Toby Dorr. She's wearing sensible glasses and a sweatshirt with a paw print on it. She has never had a speeding ticket. She runs a church charity, and right now, she is sweating through her shirt because she is smuggling a monster out of the Lansing Correctional Facility. This isn't just any jail. This place is legendary. It is Kansas's oldest and most secure prison, a fortress known as the Walls. It houses the state's most violent criminals behind 30-foot stone barriers and gun towers. It's a place designed to break men. Escaping here isn't just difficult, it's considered impossible. The guard at the gate leans in. He smiles at Toby. He rests his hand on the side of the van, inches away from the plastic crate where the killer is hiding. The van smells like wet fur. There is a chorus of barks and whines coming from the back. It's not just John in there. Toby is transporting real rescue dogs in the other crates. To the guard, this is just a normal Tuesday. The noise of the dogs is the perfect cover for the silence of the killer. He asks, "How are the dogs today, Toby?" If the plastic crate creaks, it's over. If John sneezes, it's over. If the guard decides to be helpful and says, "That crate looks heavy, let me help you move it," they're both dead. Toby forces a smile. She feels like she's going to vomit. She grips the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turn white. She says the dogs are fine. The guard pauses. He looks at the van, he looks at her, and the silence stretches out for 5 seconds. But it feels like 5 years. Then, he waves his hand. The massive steel gates grind open. Toby presses the gas. She forces herself to drive 10 miles an hour, watching the rearview mirror, waiting for the siren, waiting for the bullet. But the bullet never comes. The van merges onto the public road, and just like that, the safe harbor dog lady has unleashed one of the most dangerous men in America onto the streets. This isn't just a story about a prison break. Breaking out is the easy part. The hard part, the part that will actually blow your mind, is understanding the psychological break that happened first. To understand how John Manard squeezed out of the prison, we have to understand how he squeezed his way into Toby's mind. To find the start of this disaster, you don't look at the prison. You look at Toby's house. Before the escape, Toby Dorr was living a life of suffocating normalcy. She was the definition of a good girl. She followed every rule, worked a corporate job for 20 years, and raised 2 sons. From the outside, her life looked perfect, but underneath the surface, she was screaming. In the span of a few months, her entire world collapsed. First, she was laid off from the career she had built for decades. Then she was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. When Toby looked in the mirror, she didn't see a survivor. She saw a ghost. She felt invisible. Her marriage had turned into a cold, hollow arrangement. She later described feeling like a piece of the furniture, necessary for the house to function, like a lamp, but completely unnoticed. She and her husband lived parallel lives, passing each other like strangers. She was starving for affection. Then the final blow came. Her father died. He was the one man who had loved her unconditionally. His death left a hole in her heart the size of the Grand Canyon. Seeking a purpose, she founded the Safe Harbor program. The idea was beautiful. She would take dogs from kill shelters and bring them into the Lansing prison. The inmates would train them. It was a program about redemption. It was a massive success. Toby became a fixture at the prison. She could walk through the heavy steel gates with a freedom that no other civilian had. The guards trusted her explicitly. To them, she wasn't a threat. She was just the nice dog lady. And that is exactly what prisoner number 1001393 was counting on. John Manard was everything her life wasn't. He was chaotic, he was dangerous, he was intense. He wasn't in prison for a minor mistake. He was serving life without parole for a brutal crime he committed when he was just 17. It was 1996. John and an accomplice approached a man named Donald England in a parking lot. They wanted his car. When England hesitated, he was shot in the chest at point-blank range. They dragged his dying body out of the vehicle and left him on the pavement just to steal a set of wheels. Under the law, John was never getting out. He was a lifer. But he didn't act like a defeated man. He was charming with a boyish grin and red hair. He joined the dog program, and he immediately set his sights on Toby. You have to understand the mind of a lifer. John Manard was a predator who had learned to survive in the most hostile environment on Earth. He knew how to read people better than a psychologist. He watched Toby. He saw the sadness in her eyes. He smelled the vulnerability on her like a shark smells blood in the water. He didn't rush. He was patient. It started with empathy. One afternoon, Toby came into the prison looking destroyed. Her father had just had emergency surgery, and she had been at the hospital all night. Her husband hadn't gone with her. She was running on zero sleep and heartbreak. John walked up to her. He looked her right in the eye, something nobody had done for a long time, and said, "You look sad today. What's wrong?" That was the hook. It sounds simple, but for a woman who hadn't been seen in years, it was like oxygen. She told him about her father. She told him about her husband and not being there. And John Manard, the convicted killer, said the perfect thing. He said, "I can't believe he wasn't there for you. If I was your husband, I would never leave your side. You deserve to be treated like a queen." It was a lie. It was a manipulation technique known as love bombing, but it worked. Toby felt a door open in her heart that she had welded shut years ago. The relationship blossomed in the shadows. They couldn't touch, there were cameras everywhere, so they built a secret world right under the noses of the wardens. They started passing notes. It began with innocent messages hidden in dog treats. Then, John got clever. He rolled up tiny, passionate love letters until they were the size of a toothpick. He slid them inside the nylon weave of a dog's collar. Toby would take the dog home, wait until her husband was asleep, and frantically search the collar at 2 a.m. to read his words. He wrote her poetry. He drew her pictures. He created a fantasy world where the two of them were the only people who mattered. "We have a fairy tale love the size of infinity," he wrote. Next, he isolated her. In his letters, he convinced her that her husband was the enemy, that her life was the prison, and that he, the man actually in a cage, was her only freedom. But a romance through letters wasn't enough for John. He wanted out. He started planting the idea. "If only we could be together," he would say. "If only I could just curl up in a box and come home with you." It started as a joke, then became a plan. The logistics were insane. They were fighting against a security system designed to keep thousands of men inside. But John had found the one weakness: Toby's reputation. "They never check your van," he told her. "They trust you." He was right. The guards saw the dog lady and stopped looking in the bag. But there was a massive physical problem: the dog crates. The crates were standard airline kennels designed for a 70-pound golden retriever. John Manard was 6'2" and weighed nearly 200 pounds. It was a mathematical impossibility. So, John Manard decided to change the physics. In the months leading up to the escape, John went to war with his own body. He went on a starvation diet. He gave away his food trays. He drank only water and coffee. He spent hours in his cell doing intense yoga. He trained his body to collapse, learning to fold his legs against his chest and curve his spine into a C shape for an hour without cramping. He lost 25 pounds in 1 week. On the day of the escape, he shaved his entire body, head, arms, legs, to reduce friction. He was sculpting himself into human cargo. Meanwhile, Toby was preparing the outside world. She liquidated her retirement savings, took out cash advances, and gathered $25,000. She bought a getaway vehicle, a blue pickup truck parked at a storage facility. She bought maps, supplies, and hair dye. She was terrified. She was vomiting from stress every morning. But she was addicted to the adrenaline, and addicted to him. The day arrived, February 12th, 2006. Toby pulled her van up to the prison loading dock. She felt like she was walking to the gallows. John had prepared the crate. He placed a cardboard box inside to block the view through the air holes. He stripped down to his underwear and greased his shoulders to help him slide. Then he climbed in. Imagine the pain. A 6'2" man folding his knees to his chest, crushing his internal organs, exhaling just to get the door latched. He was like a contortionist of desperation. Toby threw a blanket over the crate and stacked other boxes on top. It looked like a pile of junk. Now came the true test. She had to move him. If she struggled too much, a guard might offer to help. If a guard lifted that crate, he would know instantly that it didn't contain a 30-pound dog. It contained a 180-pound man. Toby didn't lift it. That would be impossible. The crate weighed nearly 200 pounds. Instead, she used a flatbed cart. She rolled it to the edge of the van's open bay, then, using every ounce of adrenaline-fueled strength, she didn't lift, she shoved. She quickly loaded the other crates with the real dogs to complete the disguise. She slammed the doors, she got in, and drove to the gate. The guard waved, the gate opened. As the prison disappeared in the rearview mirror, Toby forced herself to drive the speed limit. A few miles down the road, she pulled into the storage unit and opened the bag. "John," she whispered. The crate shook. John Manard burst out, gasping for air, his skin red and marked with the grid pattern of the plastic floor. He looked up at her, sweat pouring down his face, and grinned. We did it. They were free. They jumped into the blue pickup truck and headed south. For the next 12 days, the safe harbor escape dominated the news. The grandmother and the killer. America was hooked. But inside the pickup truck, the reality was getting weird. They drove to a cabin in Tennessee and called it their honeymoon. You would expect them to hide in a basement or run for Mexico. They didn't. They played house. They went shopping at Walmart, the most wanted couple in America, holding hands, pushing a cart. They bought new clothes, and this is the crazy part, they bought a parakeet. Yeah, like a bird. Fugitives running for their lives, carrying $25,000 in cash, stopped to buy a pet bird in a cage named Pidgey. It was a delusion. They were trying to build a domestic family life while the FBI was hunting them down. They even bought 2 acoustic guitars and the sheet music for the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, a movie about escaped convicts. They were living out a script, listening to the soundtrack of their own crime. Toby later said these days were the happiest of her life. For the first time, she was with a man who was fully present. They cooked dinner, they talked. It was the domestic bliss she had craved for 30 years. But for John, the mask was slipping. He was used to adrenaline. The quiet life was making him paranoid. He saw police everywhere. The charming suitor was replaced by a controlling convict. He slept with a gun. Toby began to realize she hadn't just liberated a lover, she had unleashed a monster. But she was in too deep. The law was closing in. The U.S. Marshals tracked the purchase of the blue pickup truck, and on February 24th, just 12 days after the escape, the fairy tale ended. Toby and John were in Chattanooga, Tennessee, walking out of a Barnes & Noble bookstore like any other couple. But a deputy U.S. Marshal happened to be in the parking lot on a different case. Pure bad luck. He saw the tall, red-headed man and the older woman, and he recognized the profile. Toby and John got into the truck and pulled onto Interstate 75. They didn't know they'd been spotted until the rearview mirror exploded with blue and red lights. John looked in the mirror. His eyes went dead. It's them. Toby expected him to pull over. Instead, he slammed his foot on the gas. The engine roared and the chase was on. This wasn't like a slow-speed pursuit, it was a death race. John was weaving through rush-hour traffic at over 100 miles per hour, cutting off semi-trucks, driving on the shoulder. Toby gripped the dashboard, screaming and begging him to stop. She watched the speedometer climb 100, 110. She realized that in that moment, the love story was a lie. He was willing to kill them both rather than go back to a cage. John saw a gap in the median. A grassy strip separated the highway lines. He thought he could cut across it and drive against traffic. It was a desperate move. He yanked the wheel. The truck hit the soft grass at 100 miles per hour. It didn't turn, it just launched. Crash. The truck slammed into a massive tree. The sound was deafening. The airbags exploded, filling the cab with white smoke. Toby was dazed, her chest crushed. She looked at John. He was alive, scrambling to open the door, trying to fight. But then the doors were ripped open. "Show me your hands." Dozens of officers surrounded the wreck. They dragged John out and threw him onto the ground. Toby was pulled out next, face down in the dirt, handcuffs snapped onto her wrists. She had lost a shoe in the crash. She lay there, 1 foot bare in the cold grass, realizing it was all over. She turned her head. She saw John lying a few feet away. The spotlight from the police helicopter was shining directly on him. The light was blindingly bright, creating a glowing aura around his body against the darkness. Toby later described this moment with a heartbreaking, twisted beauty. She said he looked like an angel. Even as he was being arrested, even as the reality of his violence was laid bare, she still saw him as her savior. That is the power of the manipulation he had over her. He looked at her one last time, and then he was dragged away. They were separated and the honeymoon was over. Toby was taken to jail. The media laughed at her. Her husband divorced her, her children were horrified. She had lost her home, her job, her reputation, and her freedom. And the love story? In the interrogation room, John tried to take the blame at first, but as the months went on, the reality became clear. He had used her. He had identified a target, groomed her, extracted her resources, and discarded her. The fairy tale love evaporated the moment the handcuffs went on. Toby was sentenced to 27 months in federal prison. John had 10 years added to his sentence. But here's the most surprising part. Prison didn't destroy Toby Dorr. It saved her. Stripped of her roles, no longer a wife, director, or mother, she was forced to confront the emptiness that led her to that dog crate. She realized that she had been running away long before she got in that van. She served her time, wrote a memoir, and rebuilt her life, eventually remarrying a man who knows her past and loves her anyway. And John Manard? He went back to the concrete box. He became a legend in the prison system, the guy who escaped in a dog crate. But legends don't get you to go home. He spent the rest of his life behind bars. He died in prison on August 25th, 2024. He was 45 years old. He never saw the outside world again after those 12 days. If you enjoyed this Prison Break case, check out the channel. There you'll find many great stories just like this one. If you like what you see, please subscribe. I'd be very grateful, and I'll catch you next time.